Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mustache Tales. I'm Jay Chandrasekhar. This is my good buddy, Hayes MacArthur.
Hey guys, Jay, I'm really excited for you to meet my friend Cole today. Cole is the CEO and Executive Director of Higher Ground USA, which I know we've talked about
Higher Ground.
before. You've heard of it.
Higher Ground.
You heard about it. I'm always wearing the hats and the sweatshirts, and when you come up to Sun Valley, you see them working on the mountains. Cole and I are repping today. So we're going to talk about Higher Ground, what it does, some of Cole's career as a Navy SEAL and his transition into his new role. But I kind of wanted to start today, Jay, with a major announcement, which is you and I have just closed a deal that took months to work on, where you are coming up to Ketchum, Idaho. And on January 13th at the Arduous Theater in Ketchum, you are going to do a comedy show to benefit Higher Ground USA.
I can't wait. I'll be there. January 13th. I mean, you brought the CEO to seal the deal. I mean, what can I say?
That's what it took. I mean, after months of talking to your people, your demands and your riders, Jay, are just insane. You know, we talk every day. I didn't know how high.
Is Jay a blue M&M guy in the waiting room?
Yes.
Well, it's just vodka and ice. I mean, it's just vodka and ice. I mean, I frame it differently, but that's what closed the deal at the end.
No, this is going to be a great event. I just want to tell people up front that pretty soon at highergroundusa.org, tickets are going to be available. Jay, if you'll allow me, I'll dust off some of my material and be your opening act. We'll probably rope up some friends and bring them up to do the show with us. But the show is going to benefit. Well, I'll let Cole talk about what Higher Ground is and who we serve. But this particular portion, Jay, now that you're in the family, is for the adaptive part of Higher Ground, where we allow people with physical disabilities to come up and experience the outdoors. And really, we'll tell some stories about that. But Jay, you are using your powers for a great cause, and we can't thank you enough.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, there was a pump fake last year where we were supposed to come up, but I think I double booked myself, so I apologize to all the good people at Higher Ground for that. But I'll be back. I'll be raring to go. Can I swear at this venue? Can I make blue jokes, or you want me to try to come up with something clean?
I'll leave that up to Cole.
Okay.
We don't like to put restrictions on talent, Jay.
Yeah,
but
I like comedy, so I think comedy should be unfiltered, and people can just kind of put their whatever views are coming to the side, because comedy's comedy, and just out there to get people to laugh.
Okay, good. I mean, I'm not a barbarian. I know how to handle the crowd. So,
Cole is talking to his wife about, he's coming on the podcast, and he mentioned you, Jay, and he told me he's a huge fan of Super Troopers. And he went through, and I don't know if you hear this a lot, Jay, but Cole was watching Super Troopers one time, and his wife asked him to turn it off. So did you find that guys have loved it throughout the years more than women? I always thought it had a big crossover appeal.
You know, there's definitely a bigger male crowd than female crowd for sure. And they're I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's because we're mostly guys. I really don't know, but that's probably true. We have plenty of female fans, though. It's plenty of female.
I know. I've seen it as well. I think it's just a taste.
I think for me, I can't follow movies where you have to follow along very in depth, because my brain turns out, or I just pass out. Like, I'll fall asleep. But Super Troopers is one of those movies where anytime I turn it on, I can just sit there with my brain off, quote about half of it, and just laugh the entire time.
Cole, that sounds super insulting, but I'm taking it as a super compliment.
It's the best compliment you can get. It's one of the most relaxing, hour and a half of my life. So
Thank you.
So funny story. Just talking about Super Troopers a little bit. So during one of our training blocks in SQT, we had one of my great buddies. He's a great team guy, and we're going through one of our training blocks, and we started calling.
What's SQT?
Oh, sorry, SEAL. So you go through BUDS, which is Basic Underwater Demolition School, and then you go to SEAL qualification training. So during SEAL qualification training, we're out at one of our training sites, and you had to do graded runs, and one of my buddies we started calling Farva, and he hated the nickname. Like he doesn't look like Farva at all. He's built like a middle linebacker, like a college middle linebacker, but we just started calling him Farva, and you could tell it was kind of rattling him. So we told the instructors, and before one of his runs, like right as he's about to start, he just starts going, "Easy ride, easy ride," and you could just see the fumes like coming out of my buddy's ears. And afterwards, he's from Mass, and he's like, "Dude, I got this instructor telling me easy ride before I go in. Like, are you kidding me?" So yeah, that's try to tie in Super Troopers as much as I can.
Yeah, there's every group has some connection to a Farva, and you don't want to be the Farva. You don't want to be the Farva.
It's funny. I've actually found, having friends who have served in the military and buddies who are cops, there is a affinity for humor in these high intense profession. It's almost like you're dealing with, it's a protective layer, I guess, of something where like it's a distance from the work that you're exposing yourself to. A lot of times there's like kind of dark jokes being made or quoting, Farva or Super Troopers. And I don't know. I've always thought that was like something that I wouldn't have expected, but it's part of the communities.
Yeah, I think it's part of a lot of people's lives. My wife and I crack jokes all the time when stuff is bad. It just makes it lighthearted. Jay, I don't know if you know this, but I have a 10 or 11-month-old now. Holy cow.
Wow.
And I'm sure you got kids, and those like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. wake ups where you're just sitting there and you're like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
But humor is always an important
I will
part of that.
say humor it's very important as a coping mechanism. One of the things, though, as a cautionary tale I found that has not worked in marriage is sarcasm in the moment.
Yeah.
I think quoting lines and doing bits is great, but when I go to sarcasm, it's usually met with a lot of heat. I would just say not to do that. So we start every podcast with a story, Cole. It's called Mustache Tales. I have so many stories about working with Higher Ground, how we know each other. And it was funny because we were talking before you came on, and you were like, yeah, I definitely want to come on. I just don't want to talk all about me and stuff. And I'm like, oh, no, don't worry. You're talking to two actors. We will make this about ourselves. it's part of us. We have to do it. So I wanted to tell a quick story about something that happened last year at one of our a camp. So, at Higher Ground, we bring people up to the woods, and in the winter it's recreational therapy. And I want to tell a story, and it sounds almost written, but there was a combat army medic named Hope from Alabama that had come up.
Hey, can you just tell us what Higher Ground is like before you go to the story?
Yes, Cole.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll take over from here. So here's my elevator pitch to everyone listening, and for those not familiar with Higher Ground. So Higher Ground, we enhance lives through therapeutic recreation. We serve the veteran and first responder communities as well as the disability community. So we started as Sun Valley Adaptive Sports 25 years ago. So for those that don't know, any ski area that operates on national forest land, they're required to have an adaptive program for ski lessons and to get people with disabilities up on the slope. So we provided that service for the Sun Valley Company for, I want to say, 7 or 8 years before starting to serve veterans and first responders. And we've been doing it, like I said, for 25 years. We have 27 week-long veteran first responder programs. And what we say is the best things in the best places. So that's either fly fishing, whitewater kayaking, mountain biking, surfing, kind of you name it. We do it and kind of figure out a way to get out there. We also have programming for the disability community. Like Hayes was about to mention, in the snow time, they're on the mountain every day offering ski lessons. And in the summer, we have programming every day. So that's hiking programs, mountain biking programs, overnight programs, field trips, bocce ball, like you name it, our adaptive sports team is out there. And then our last avenue we have is called CREW, and that's Community Resiliency Units. And those are kind of our more national reach. So we have 35 crew ambassadors. They've all been through our veteran first responder programs, and they put on day or weekend recreational therapy programs for our veterans and first responders. So we're taking investors now.
Sign up for our program.
Yeah.
But I will say, Cole, and you can speak to this because we've just pivoted from to start serving first responder communities, which I heard you mention once that, and if you could explain this, that the first responder community is where the military veterans were 25 years ago. But what did you mean by that?
Yeah, 100%. So with the wars that started off, in 2001, the GWAT, Global War on Terror, initially people got back from that, and the suicide rate was super high, and the suicide rate still is extremely high for veterans. It's about, I think, 2020 study came out, and it's about 17 veterans a day commit suicide.
Wow.
So that rate was a lot higher back in the early 2000s, and then it became acceptable to go talk to psychs and talk to people about suicide. So it became, more of a topic of discussion. So that's where the military was in the mid 2000s. And that is where the veteran first responder community is now. Talking to a psych, anyone in the military, especially in combat arms, I don't think it's top of their mind. Everyone puts on this persona of, I'm a rough, tough special forces, or I'm a rough, tough Navy SEAL, and no one wants to go talk about their inner feelings or their inner demons. But once it became acceptable to go talk about, the suicide rate in our communities dropped significantly. And the first responder community still kind of has that stigma. And I don't have any studies on this, but they have that stigma in terms of, it's hard to go out to get help. And one of those reasons is staffing. So if I go talk to a psych and take myself off the line for, a day or two, my other buddies or other people I work with have to pick up the slack. So that's part of it. But yeah, the first responder community is where the veterans were 20 years ago.
And the difference between the way service works for the veterans, the military, and for first responders is really different, right? Military personnel are deployed and they're away from their families or their home for a long time, and then they come back and reintegrate. The first responder community, essentially, they go out to a battlefield every day and then return home. Their transitions are it's a different integration into their home life. So I'm really excited about the way we've expanded and who we're serving, and it's cool. A quick story on that. One of my closest buddies in the world is a guy I went to kindergarten with. He's been a homicide detective in Chicago for 25 years, and I'm gonna imitate him right now, but I'm gonna do much more of a Chicago accent than he has. But during COVID, when people were told to stay inside, I called Nick, who was in Chicago. And I said, Nick, this is crazy, man. Like, you're going to have a whole city stay inside? Or are we going to be okay? And Nick's like, oh, yeah, we'll be fine. We got a lot of stuff. We know how to contain people and serve them and keep it all good. And I said, great. I talk to Nick every now and then. That's the only reason I know what's really happening in these places. So about 2 months later in July, after the George Floyd videotape had come out and the city was being ransacked and there was a lot of turmoil and crime and violence, essentially what happened to the police department and the fire department is they were told to be on 24-hour duty. Essentially, they were out in the streets serving. And I called Nick during that time. So I talked to him a couple months ago. He's like, oh, yeah, we're fine. It's going to be good. And I talked to him, in late July of 2020. He said, oh, shit, man. He said, this is fucking crazy. He said, all hell's broken out. He's like, we can't do anything. And Nick has a daughter who's immunocompromised. So that was also when COVID was still a concern, and is a concern still. But when Nick would go out and interact in the general public, he would have to come home at night, and it would take him like an hour to take off all of his equipment. His wife was washing it in the washer. He had to sterilize himself just to go into his own home. And in a really inspirational story, we had another buddy who was also keeping tabs on Nick during this time, and essentially just said, Nick, listen, man, I'm going to get you a hotel room for the next couple months. And, you could just go back there after you're out on the streets and live there. And he did this really quietly. And I love Nick's wife, Jen. I'm sure she was happy to get him out of the house for a little while during that time. But I just thought of that on a really basic human level of two friends who are helping each other out and supporting each other at like on a level where no one had been filling that void. No one had thought about serving the people who serve us, and so that's kind of the cool part about, I think, now trying to get back to the first responder community and support them, because they're out there every day experiencing stuff, and we kind of make it our job to service them. So it's going to be an exciting expansion.
Cole, you were a Navy SEAL. Is it as sort of difficult to become one as we in Hollywood make it seem like? I mean, it usually takes about sort of 4 to 6 minutes in our movies with some guy yelling at you, and then you go in the water, and then boom, you're a Navy SEAL. But I mean, it's much harder than that, right? I mean, it's like
No, Jay, you're spot on. 4 to 6 minutes in and out of the water, a little wet and sandy, and you are a Navy SEAL. But yeah, it's a great program. I was fortunate enough to be on the other side of it my last couple years in the military, to be working Hell Weeks and be on the training side of it, and that was a blast. And to see, one of the most amazing things working a Hell Week is, and Hell Week, it starts on Sunday, it gets done Friday around 9 or 10, and you get 2 naps during that time that are about 2 hours apiece. But then on the instructor side, we work in 3 shifts, and they're 8-hour shifts. So one of the craziest parts was when you work your 8-hour shift and you go home and you're like, oh man, I'm smoked right now. But you get to sleep for 10, 11 hours and come back. And those guys still have as much energy as they had before when you left. And, that was something very impressive to see. And,
How do you nap during that training? During that, you're being exposed to explosives. You're maximizing your physical limits, and then are you able to just like shut down for 2 hours sleep and then get right back at it, or is there like a?
yeah, I think, some guys totally can. They're the guys that can fall asleep, just sitting in this podcast, at any point they could just fall asleep. And other guys are so wired. And the worst part, I always tell people, everyone's like, oh, what was the hardest part of Buds? And I was like, honestly, just waking up every day. Like, that is the hardest part. It's like getting up and putting your shoes on. But once you're out the door, you're like, okay, I can keep going. So I was afraid of the wake up. Like, I didn't want to wake up. So I think, at least one of those naps, I'm pretty sure I stayed awake the entire 2 hours.
what? I mean, this. Were you a great swimmer before you joined the program?
No. So, we have some incredible athletes, D1 athletes. We have Olympic athletes. I was just a guy that tried hard. So I was just that hustle player on basketball, like that.
Yeah.
That was me. I'm just the guy that tried hard.
Sure.
So that zero athletic ability, just to try hard. That's me.
And then when you go on, Jay.
I
Wow,
mean, I'm just thinking about, like, there are these stories of like lots of underwater stuff. Like, you don't have to be particular. I mean, you just have to know how to swim, and then they're like, "We'll get you there."
No, you have to be a good swimmer. Like, you have to put in the time. But just like anything, I'm sure it's the same with comedy. Like, you start out, Jay, you started out at Colgate with your buddies in your fraternity. Like, you guys weren't great comedians. You might have thought, everyone's like, oh, right, Jay and his boys are funny.
Right.
But you got to think of all the years that you put in, fine tuning your profession. It's the same with before you show up to Buds. Like, some kids train for like 3 to 4 years. And so doing that, you get really good at running and swimming and all the other activities you have to do.
Your transition out, Cole, and into your new role. The story you told is you were at an eval. I guess you had to do a psych eval after stuff, and you were asked a question.
Yeah. No, that's this is a good one. So, like I was talking about meeting with psychs. I had an abrupt ending to my deployment in 2019. They come back and they make you talk with a psychologist. And like I said before, any rough, tough Navy SEAL, the last thing they want to do getting back from deployment is go talk to a psych about their feelings. So, I went into this hour-long session, and thought I was doing a good job kind of deflecting your questions and staying in my circle. And then all of a sudden, about halfway through, she's like, "What do you do for fun?" And in my head, I was like, "Oh, it's easy. I work out." And she was like, "No, that puts stress on your body. What do you do for fun?" And I sat there for about what seemed like 15 minutes in just complete silence, but it was honestly probably 30 seconds to a minute. And I looked up finally and it was like, nothing. And she said, "You have to get outside and go do something fun that doesn't put stress on your body." So I was like, okay. So I'm sure you guys have all been familiar with Southern California. You go to Costco and they have the Wave Storm surfboards, which is an 8-foot foam board. It's $100. It's the best deal because if you break it, you can bring the 2 pieces back to Costco and they'll give you a brand new one. And I started surfing. I try to go surfing every day. Working on the beach in Coronado, getting out in the water was my priority, and it was the best time for me to just clear my head and not have that stress in my body. So super thankful for that. But that was my first introduction to therapeutic recreation, and I didn't know it at the time. But when I started applying for this job, I was like, wait a second, I've done therapeutic recreation. I know exactly what that is. So a big proponent of it. Proponent of it. So what do you guys do? Like, what do you guys like to do to get out and have fun? Like, what's your version of therapeutic recreation?
I play golf 7 days a week.
Get out of here.
But it's hard to describe it as fun sometimes because I've become pretty goddamn good, and like 1 or 2 missed shots will send me into a little bit of a fury. And I'm like sweating and angry and swearing and like, I'm swearing 1980s style, not 2024 style. And luckily no one's got a boom mic out there. But it's fun though. Absolutely, I do that for fun, and I just don't have the trauma that preceded it.
Right.
I was listening to you. Go ahead, Hayes. What do you do for fun?
I started to do everything. Getting outside for me has been incredible. A lot of it I do through the program through Higher Ground, but I did have a friend of mine say something really weird to me. I went fly fishing. I'm not the best fly fisherman. It's very technical, but I certainly had all the gear and I looked great. I had the hat and the waders and everything.
Yeah.
My buddy looked at me at the river. He saw me do a cast and he goes, "You look like the TV version of Brad Pitt in A River Runs Through It." He's like, "Your cast is horrible. You look like an actor who showed up like a fly fisherman." So I'm still getting humbled doing a lot of fishing up here. And then what I love to do in the winter is go uphill. I started doing that where they've got the stuff called skins. You put moleskins on the bottom of skis now, and you can go up a hill and then ski down it. And essentially it's just because there's a lot of public lands up here, you can look at any mountain that's got enough snow on it and just point to it and go right up, pick your line and go right up it.
Are they cross country skis? Like telemark?
No, they're downhill skis with an outfitted binding that allows your heel to pick up.
Yeah.
So you can move it up to get the leverage to go up, and you kind of stick to the snow, and then when you get to the top you lock them in and they just become downhill skis.
And you have poles, I assume?
Yeah, poles.
It's probably pretty hard to get up, right?
Yeah, it's a killer workout. And the first time I did it, I showed up and I had a bunch of layers on, like I was dressed like I was going downhill skiing, and I just sweat. You can do it in a t-shirt when it's freezing out, you know, but it's good stuff.
Cole, how do you demolish things underwater?
How do you demolish things under the water? That's a great question. There's a bunch of different techniques that we use, and different types of explosives that we use. That
you got a pipeline? You got a pipeline you're looking to take out?
Yeah. What do you got something in your pool you need gone, or what is it?
Say I wanted to take out the Russian pipeline in Perth. Just say it.
No, that's funny. We got a bunch of random different explosives and ways to blow stuff up underwater. So if that answers your question vaguely enough.
Let me put it this way. So there must be like the fire must be inside a waterproof thing that, is there, I don't know, you call it a charge? Like, how do you light the fuse?
Yeah, so you take your Bic lighter, you throw some Vaseline on it, and you go underwater and just start clicking it. No, but like I said, to keep it vague, there's different ways you can initiate things underwater. So they don't all take. They're not all your fireworks at the TNT booth down the street.
Yeah, you take 2 clams and you spark them. You
Yeah,
roll,
you
you
just
roll them
keep
together.
banging them together.
So when you blow something up underwater for the first time, are you guys all like this? Like is it like are there fish floating around? Like
Yes. So you can't be in the water when it's going off because the overpressure from water is extremely high because water is heavier and denser than air. So the overpressure from that could cause some serious damage. There's times where you get to be on the beach and watch something explode, and it's pretty cool to see. It's fun. It's really fun.
What about your aim in shooting? I mean, you have to have some kind of marksmanship training. Did you naturally have an ability to handle firearms before you joined? No.
My family, we did not. I think my mom had a gun. So my mom had a gun that she kept in a safe that I never saw. 357 Magnum. I have it now. They gave it to me. But no, I never really shot. What's that?
It's a huge gun.
Oh yeah. So my mom had back in the day had a peeping Tom or whatever, and one of her friends was a sheriff and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna get you a gun." So she bought a gun for the sheriff, and he was like, "Go to the range, put a bunch of rounds through a silhouette target, and just tape it on your front door." So that was my mom's way of getting rid of the perp, if you will. So yes, yeah.
Just let it go.
Crazy, huh?
Hey, are you thinking back to your peeping Tom days?
Yeah, God, I'm glad she never. She just had a whistle. That kept me away.
I mean, I shot a 357 once on a range, and it went like this, boom! Like it was. I couldn't. I mean, I was never quite ready. I've shot a number of different guns, and I never can get over the sound. I'm in Super Troopers 2, we shot these guns. They blanks in them.
Yeah.
But I shot mine, and I knew it was coming. And then Kevin Effernan played Farva. He started shooting in the air, and my physical reaction was this, like that, like totally uncocked. And it's in the movie because it was the only shot we had, and I couldn't stop reacting like that. And I'm like, I don't think I'd make the best SEAL. Jesus Christ, are we doing it again? You guys had to deal with a lot of that sound. But I mean, I listened to your another podcast you were on, and it was talking about the training for indoor explosions, which I know you were talking about causing traumatic brain injury.
Oh, just the training. You mean when an explosive is released in training?
Yeah, because they have to, I guess, get people like me ready for the sound, right? And go, it's going to be like this. You're going to have to not throw your hands in the air.
And cry. And you can't cry and scream and shit your pants. You got to be used to it.
Because that's one of the big issues with vets now is these brains that have been jarred against the sides, for lack of a better term, I suppose.
Yeah, I would call them micro TBIs that occur during training, which is where 99% of your blast exposure comes from, unless you're in some massive IED blast overseas. But everything from shooting a Carl Gustav, which is a shoulder-fired projectile, that'll rattle your brain pretty good. And then even explosives that we do training inside of big concrete structures. And our training staff does the best to make sure people are back far enough away. But when that overpressure, it's the same thing that could happen underwater. When that overpressure, if you're in a confined space, those waves bounce against the walls and come back. And so I've had a couple times where you literally feel the inside of your brain rattling. And it's just kind of an unnerving, feeling. And you'll have a headache that night, and it typically goes away, and most guys just carry on. So there's a lot more studies now that Naval Special Warfare is doing, NSW, to monitor blast exposure to people and then limit that where possible.
So maybe not doing as much indoor blasting and just telling you it's going to be real loud.
Yeah. we train just like we fight, and so that training will always be there, and guys will always be exposed to blast training. But maybe they're coming up with different ways to minimize the impact on the force. And I had a buddy hit me up. It was his birthday last week, and I was talking to him. And he's like, "Yeah, man, I'm probably going to get out." I was like, "Why is that?" And he's like, "Well, I played football for 4 years in college, and then all of high school, and then I joined the teams and went to breacher school." And have just been exposed to blast for the past 8 years. And you couple that on top of football and concussions, and he's like, I'm just kind of over it with a blast exposure.
Yeah. And I've heard about these hyperbaric chambers. Is that can you tell us what that is?
Yeah. So HBOT, hyperbaric, I think it's chamber therapy or something like that. So what that is so let's say you have the chamber, they call it. If you have a dive injury, you have to go into the chamber, and basically because a dive injury typically happens if like you ascend too fast or something like that, and then the bubbles. Yeah, the bends. Yeah, you're a diver. There you go. So the bubbles in your brain or different cells can expand too fast, causing to get the bends. And so they'll put you in a dive chamber and bring you down just like you're at depth. But what a dive chamber is, think of like a big capsule where they can pressurize it to make you feel like you're at 100 feet or 50 feet. And what they do, and I've heard the benefits of it, is your body or your cells burn oxygen and need oxygen to process. And so what hyperbarics does is it condenses the oxygen that you're intaking. So you'll sit in there for about an hour, and you're just getting 100% oxygen at depth. So it's even more condensed, which helps your cells rejuvenate and regrow. So the thought behind hyperbarics is that, from my understanding, I'm very new to this, is that it helps your cells rejuvenate and grow faster than they would at sea level.
I see. And that's had some effect on traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, there's a guy, Dan from Mission 43, and he went and did hyperbarics in Pocatello, Idaho, and he was in a very large blast overseas. Believe he lost some of his teammates. Anyways, he did hyperbarics in Pocatello for I think a month, and he talks about this experience of him going fly fishing every day after hyperbarics, and finally one day he was able to tie a fly on tippet, and he realized like his aperture just kind of opened up, and at that point you realize like, oh man, like I'm starting to see progress, I'm getting better. So I think there are benefits. I haven't done it myself, but hopefully can give it a try at some point in the future.
He couldn't tie. His dexterity was gone.
His dexterity was gone, so he couldn't tie his little fly on the tippet line, on the fly fishing line. But then eventually he was able to tie it, and in his mind, he's like, that's when he realized that cognitively he was coming back.
What percentage of people in the military have to have these traumatic brain injuries, do you think? I mean, is it a large percentage? I mean,
I think it depends what your job is in the military. There's people that never, hardly fire weapons.
Yeah.
But then there's, people in my profession or other combat arms professions where you're shooting a lot. You're shooting rifle, pistol, shoulder fired rockets, like different types of artillery, and you're shooting a lot. So I couldn't put a percentage on it, but a large percentage of people have TBIs, and I think what's hard for guys, in my generation, is like we're so used to hearing the people in early 2000s and early 2010s that had these big blast exposures, and we're like, okay, I understand how that's a TBI, but then you have guys that may never see combat, and like I've never seen combat, but I've been exposed to a handful of blast exposures in training that have to look in the mirror and be like, okay, wait a second, I'm thinking differently. I treat my spouse differently. Like something's off here, and I probably need to get my brain checked out. But a lot of guys don't put those, don't link those two together because they're like, oh, it's just training. I wasn't exposed to an IED blast.
Right.
Yeah.
And the trauma, though, of being in those situations, one of the things I've realized through working with the organization is that it can come from a lot of places. And to go back to this woman, Hope, who was an Army medic and is up here doing the recreational therapy, she did one of our programs. she was so effusively appreciated afterwards. I stopped by and she came up and she talked to some of the staff. And she became very emotional in thanking what we had facilitated for her, because part of the deal with higher ground is people come up with their spouses or significant others because they've been affected by the person's experience of having served in the military. And so Hope was telling us about her experience and how great it was, because we do these breakout groups after they have an experience in the woods doing something cool that we facilitated, whether it's sit skis or fly fishing or biking, stuff that they normally wouldn't be able to do. And Hope was telling about that. I was talking to her a little bit about our service, and she had amputated. She shared with us that she had amputated literally thousands of legs and arms during her time in Afghanistan. This was like in the early O's, and she said it really affected her. And I just asked. I said, "But you helped so many people." And she explained to me that in her mind, she didn't feel like she was helping them. She had felt, and she carries around with her, that she was hurting them, which was, I was like, whoa, why? And she's like, well, think about it. Like, they came in and they had, this many limbs. And then when they woke up after what I had done, I had removed something from them. So even though I was servicing them, I have felt that I hurt thousands of people. I was like, what? Wait, what? I never thought of the context of trauma coming from that point of view. I thought it came from combat or being in certain situations. And this was, they call the Army medics the angels of the battlefield. And she had experienced trauma from an emotional standpoint of servicing. And so I was just kind of blown away by that perspective.
A lot of the people are unconscious when they come in, and a decision has to be made, right? They don't wake you up and go, hey, we have to take your arm.
Yeah. Or you go from having a hurt limb to not having one, which I think psychologically would be a big difference. Cole, you told a story once about a mindset change of somebody who's doing one of our bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This Advanced Training Foundation came out and did a biking program with our staff for a week, and this guy didn't have an arm. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, look, what's been the hardest part of, not having your left arm? In my head, I was like, it's got to be tying your shoes or like something like that, right? And he's like, no, it's been my mindset. And that he's like, once I realized that I can do anything I put my mind to, like, I got no, limitations. It's something I want to throw out that Higher Ground does, and I want to make sure people are aware of it, is we do a lot for transitioning veterans as well. And if you think of people that have been in a job for 20 plus years and their identity is in whatever job there was, whether it's being a Marine in the Navy or in the Army, their identity is wrapped in that. And a lot of times that transition is really tough because people lose their identity. And I was just on a veteran program in Three Rivers Ranch, Idaho. And, one of the gentlemen there was very candid and said, I got out 14 months ago, and 14 months ago, I was a somebody. He was a 06 in the Marines. He's like, I was somebody. And he's like, I've gotten out, and since getting out, I feel like I'm a nobody. So we help transitioning veterans as well. So you don't necessarily have to be exposed to a blast injury or something like that to be involved with Higher Ground. You could be, going through the transition of getting out of the military and come out to one of our programs with your spouse as well.
The spousal support is a really incredible perspective. We heard that at the Hero's Journey benefit this year. The impact of it's just not something that I would be aware of, that when somebody goes away for a long time and has all these experiences and then comes back and is like, hey, let's take out the trash and make eggs for the kids. You're like, what? like that's not even, that's on my radar now. Like, that's my duty to do. And we heard from the wife of, I think, was he an Army Ranger?
Marine.
A Marine that had come back. And it was essentially a marriage story that they told about how having an experience together out in the outdoors had helped them kind of get back together and rediscover themselves emotionally, and how he had transitioned. And it is that transitional phase that's important to key on.
How do you teach people how to ski without like legs, for example? Is there a teacher that has no legs? Is there, hey, I did it and you can do it? Is it like, because there's a different set of push to it, you know, like.
So I will show you an example right now. There we go. It's a sit ski.
Yeah.
So they're sitting down, and then you have the person behind them help guiding them. But yeah, we do have, we have someone on our staff that is a double amputee that rips on a sit ski. Matthew, he's awesome.
Yeah.
But then we also have staff like Jay. We could get you in a sit ski when you come up just to experience it. Might be interesting.
Oh, we're definitely doing that.
But all of our staff, our adaptive staff goes through a ton of training, and there's different levels involved in the training to be able to teach, a sit ski or outrigger ski setup. So yeah, the training that is involved with our staff is very high, and they're able to teach people that never thought they could ski. Like one of our board members, actually, her daughter learned to ski before she learned how to walk. And she has a disability, but for her, if you can imagine like going fast and like seeing their daughter's eyes like light up as they're ripping down the hill, like that is so cool. And those are kind of the experiences at Higher Ground that I think everyone, we all put in long hours and are very dedicated to our job. But when you see something like that, like your heart just melts and you're like, okay, this is a awesome organization.
Does the military, do they help fund it, or is it all privately funded?
Yes, we have a handful of different funding sources. Some of those, one avenue is private donations. Another is grants. So there's a bunch of different organizations out there that there are grants that you can apply for. And I would say those are our two biggest fundraising sources is private donation and grants. So we are very well supported by the VA, and there are some other foundations out there that help us out a lot with our funding.
And we do comedy shows, Jay.
We do. We do comedy shows. I told Hayes when he said, I was thinking about this morning. I was like, we got to put the screws on Jay to get him out here. But I'm glad that's already been in the works, so we don't have to do that.
It's happening.
No, I mean, I would love to do it. I've been one of the guys in Arrested Development. One of the writers' assistants is involved with basically a military organization that brings guys who've gone through some real tough situations. I mean, like amputees and it's real rough. But they come to the Dodger game, and I've been going to the Dodger game for about, I don't know, 15, 16 years. And we go and chat with these guys. And, a lot of them are fans of Broken Lizard. And I brought my son once, and I think he was probably 4 or 5. And he said there was a guy who was a double amputee of his arms. And he had like a claw and a hook, like a hook with another different kind of claw. And my son went up to him and he looked at him and he touched the kind of hook claw and he goes, "Are you a pirate?" And the guy goes, I am. And it was like this, because there's all this tension around people who've lost their limbs. I mean, it's like there's an inner tension around it because you're like, I wonder how they're going to go on, and I wonder what they feel, and are they, there's this barrier, it's a strange barrier. But once you kind of hang out enough with these guys, you're like, okay, it's a major deal, but they're still the same human.
Yeah, they're a human, exactly. I think like you talk about that tension, but everyone is into humor, and everyone there was one guy in training, he lost his leg overseas but was at the training command, and I remember getting in a vehicle with him, and instead of putting his leg down, his metal leg or whatever, he flipped it straight up. So imagine sitting in a car next to someone and their leg is just straight up next to you and the foot's pointed back. I was like, okay, that's pretty funny.
My college roommate who's in Broken Lizard played Rabbit and Super Troopers is an amputee below the right leg.
That's right, Lemmy. He beat you in a foot race, right?
No.
When did that happen? Before college or after
18
college?
18 months old. He
Oh my gosh.
They had to take the leg off. It wasn't growing right. But he was the captain of his baseball team. He skied. And in our fraternity, he had a shower leg and a regular leg. And we would take that shower leg and we'd fill it with 2.5 beers. And we would, because that's what it fit. And then we would chug it. And we were like, oh, that could be a, and that plus a real boot we saw in New York became like the boot in Beer Fest. Like we would be chugging out of that. Like I chugged so many beers out of that thing. And it's just waterproof. It's incredible.
So Jay, how did you guys start Broken Lizard? Was that just a bunch of knuckleheads sitting together like, oh, I think we're pretty funny?
I'm from Chicago, and so I'd done some improv classes in Chicago, and I started stand up at age 19. And I came back to Colgate, and I was in a lot of plays in high school and college, but at the time, like thinking about trying to make it in show business, there were no real Indians on the movie screens and television screens except for Ben Kingsley, who was in Gandhi.
Jay, I thought you were Mexican.
When I go to Mexico, everyone speaks Spanish, and I'm like, it's easy. Claro. But yeah, it was just a way for me. I decided like I'm going to try it in comedy, but and I was just a big Monty Python fan, and so because I was already a performer, I got a chance to start to do a one-act play, and I decided to make it a sketch comedy show, and I just went around all the funniest people I knew and said, we're doing a show. And half of them are like, no, I'm not doing a show. And I convinced enough of them to do it. And it like took off like a rocket. It was like incredible.
That's awesome.
I've always thought this about you guys. The fact that you guys did that, in your early 20s and have stayed together and done a bunch of projects and all had different opportunities to do, SNL or go it on your own, but you kept it as a team. It's just so rare. It's incredible.
We get to write our own jokes and then put ourselves right into the movie as the stars of the movie. And you're like, it's pretty fucking rare. I mean, why would we leave? Like, It's like an incredible, we're going on I think we're going to make our 9th or 10th movie pretty soon. Like,
wow.
It's incredible.
So for those that don't know, the Mexican comment was a ode to Super Troopers. So just just throwing that out there.
Don't worry, Cole.
I gotta cover my bases here, all right? Gotta cover my bases. So how was it? Thank you. Yeah. How was the transition from being an actor to a director? Was that hard, or was it a pretty smooth transition?
It just became, like we did a sketch in New York City that Comedy Central was like this comedy channel bought, and they hired an Australian director to direct our thing. And I was watching it and I'm like, yeah, you need to cut it a little shorter, and you did this. And then I had all these notes, and he was like, I'm the director. And I'm like, okay. And I said to the guys, I'm like, we're never doing that again. We're never doing that. Because he did a good job, but the cut, it just wasn't timed quite right for me. And so I decided, I kind of learned how to do that. And, look, when you learn how to direct and you're directing the movie, it's just an incredible way to get a good part too. And so I'm like, there should be like a 6'2" Indian guy in this movie. And boom, there I am. And it became a way to just control, really, honestly, we think of a joke, and when you direct it, then you get to present the joke exactly as you want to. And it's not sort of the joke or kind of close, but it's exactly the joke. And so if you don't like it, it's because you don't like what I did. This is what I thought was funny. You didn't think so.
Yeah. And you don't have to explain the joke to someone and then they say whether it's good or bad and whether it makes sense. It's like, well, it made the room laugh. So
yeah, but it's more than anything, we make our jokes to make each other laugh, and we just assume that there are other people like us, and that like we don't make the jokes for the audience. We make the jokes, and then if Heffernan and Steve Lemmy and all these guys laugh, we're like, okay, then probably some other Americans are going to laugh too. And that's it,
So I told Cole a little bit about Vouch Vault, Jay. You want to give the rundown and
So it's an app I created with two guys to try to like. It's basically the Instagram of recommendations. You're trying to just like all your favorite stuff you collect in this thing called the Vouch Vault. And so, if you've watched a movie 5 years ago, it'll still be there. Your kids can go, hey, what movies were good back then? They can look through it and go, oh, this movie. And so it's books, movies, songs, wine, weed, whatever, right? Anything you want. I mean, you can vouch for higher ground. Doesn't matter. Like you can vouch for anything, like a restaurant, anything you want. So I'm going to vouch for this book. It's called "I Curse You with Joy." It's Tiffany Haddish's book. Uh, I made a film called Easter Sunday with Tiffany Haddish. She played a cop in it, and was incredible. And I've done stand up here and there with her, and she's she wrote this. She came up in like the rough part of South Central Los Angeles, and had was in and out of foster homes. Lived in her car while she was doing stand up at Comedy Store. Was very sexually promiscuous. Like talks about how she likes guys with like medium sized dicks. Like she's really detailed and honest in this book, and it's both super funny and you can really hear her voice in it, and it's a great book. It's a great book. And
She's
for all us
hilarious.
guys with medium sized dicks, I'm like, good for you, Tiffany. Good.
So, someone needs to advocate for them.
Yeah, I mean, medium plus, but medium, sure.
I have another book, which is we've just done 2 books, Jay. I'll give us a real high five for that. We usually do movies or TV shows. You guys know the author Bill Bryson? He wrote like a short history of nearly everything, and he kind of operates under the his writing voice is like making the familiar strange. So he'll talk about travel or countries and kind of point to observations about it. But this book that he wrote is called The Body, A Guide for Occupants. And he just from a very beginner's perspective mindset was like, what's the deal with our bodies? And he talks about if you took, from a chemical standpoint, if you took this many chemicals and this many elements and you laid them all out on a chemistry table, they would just be like something you'd see in a science department. But magically, somehow, when you put them all together, you get our bodies. So like that's the first chapter of how he does it. And then you're just reading it, and you're like, I've never thought about like my eyeball before. Like
right.
What the fuck is going on with my eyeball? He talks about like the DNA strands in your body, just what's in your body alone. If you laid it out on a cellular level, like linearly, it would wrap around the earth like 12 million times. What's just in your own body. So the book it's a trip. It's totally like how your body will decompose in one element, but the DNA is alive and stays on Earth like forever. That's how they can do the testing when they can tell how old the dinosaur is, like the carbon stuff that they do with it.
Uh-huh.
But it's not heady at all. It's just like almost like a stoner's perspective of being like, what is going on here? And he does it for every body type and how it works.
And his name is Bryson.
Bill Bryson.
Bill Bryson.
Yeah, he's
great.
It's just totally a trip to read. So I can't recommend it enough.
I love it.
All right. So I'm going to go away from the books. I didn't know I was with a couple nerds today. But I'm going to go away from the books. I got a kid. Bridget and I called him Carlos before we told everyone our name. So I'm going to go with that name here. But Love Every is a group. Their product design person's actually on our board of Higher Ground. But Love Every makes products for babies as they turn into toddlers and whatnot, but they have toys that are specifically for the age they're in and what they should be learning at that stage. And so, I met with this board member. She was telling me about it, and I was kind of like, okay, like, yeah, that sounds great. She's like, I'll send it to you. I'm like, okay, great. So it comes to the house, and we just kind of like put it in our closet. And our kid Carlos, we're sitting there, and he was getting bored with stuff, and we're like, okay, let's see if this stuff works. And so he's 11 months. He was 10 months at the time, and we got him the 11 and 12 months box for it. And we gave him the toys, and he had a heyday. And I was just so impressed with how they could match up these specific toys to where they're at developmentally. So I'm a huge fan. I love every. She
Is
said
it like motor skills and stuff? Like
motor skills. Yeah. So one of them's like this little box. It's like this big. There's a button. And then right above that is like, it's not an actual light, but like this thing comes up so you can see that there's a reaction. And then next to it's a light switch. And then same thing, you turn it up and then, another color comes up. And the other is like a key where you turn it and a color comes up.
Oh, wow.
But she said when they do the testing for it, she says it's great. She designs these products, the developer makes them, and then they put them in front of kids in like a room, and they're like, yeah, the ones that kids don't pay attention to, we just take them off the whiteboard and throw them away. But the ones that kids are interested in, those are the ones they go to market with. And so I'm a huge fan. I love every. It's taken a lot of stress off my wife and I in terms of the entertainment for an 11-month-old.
Yeah.
And vouching for them.
It beats the iPad. I think my dad had a Love Every. He just threw me a car key, strapped me in, and grabbed a Miller Lite.
That's great.
Dude, Cole, thank you so much for coming on, man. I'm excited that you met Jay, and I wanted to just maybe, if you could tell people if they think that they are a candidate to do one of our programs, how they could go about doing that.
Yeah, 100%. So you guys could go on Google and type in Higher Ground USA, and we'll be probably the first one that comes up. Go to our either our adaptive page or our veteran first responder page and fill out our application form, and one of our team members will be in touch with you within a week or two, and can hopefully get you out and get you on a program.
Awesome. And January 13th, Arduous Theater, Higher Ground Comedy Night.
Can't wait.
Bringing Jay back to Idaho.
And Sitsky. Jay and a Sitsky.
And Jay
I'll do that.
Perfect.
Great.
That'd be awesome.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Thanks, guys.
Mustache Tales.